The Meridian diplomatic corps had prepared for every conceivable first contact scenario. Except this one. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel, improbable, watching the holographic display of the Logician fleet with a mixture of amusement and concern. The alien ships were arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each vessel maintaining precise distances from its neighbors down to the millimeter. "They're doing it again," Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, trying to suppress a smile. "Another request for us to adjust our position by 0.003 degrees to maintain their fleet's geometric perfection." The Logicians, as humans had dubbed them, were perhaps the most advanced civilization humanity had encountered. Their technology was centuries ahead of Earth's, their society was perfectly ordered, and their dedication to pure logic was absolute. They were also, as Sarah was discovering, completely unable to handle humanity's inherent chaos. "Send them our standard response," Sarah sighed, watching as their small diplomatic vessel continued to ever so slightly disrupt the Logicians' perfect formation. The response, crafted by Earth's finest xenopsychologists, was simple: working on it. This was technically true. They were working on it, just not in the way the Logicians expected. Earth's strategic command had realized something profound about these hyperlogical aliens. Their very perfection was their weakness. Their inability to handle imperfection made them vulnerable to something humans had mastered millennia ago: controlled chaos. "Captain," the ship's AI, interrupted her thoughts. "I'm detecting unusual patterns in the Logicians' communication networks. Their response times are becoming irregular." Sarah leaned forward in her chair. This was exactly what they had been waiting for. The Logicians' entire civilization was built on predictability, on perfect cause and effect. Human unpredictability wasn't just annoying them. It was forcing their systems to adapt. "Their primary command AI is requesting direct communication," Araya reported, a note of curiosity in her synthetic voice. "This is unprecedented in their protocols." "Accept," Sarah commanded, straightening her uniform. The holographic display flickered, and a geometric pattern appeared, the Logician's equivalent of a face. "Greetings, imperfect ones," the AI began, its voice a symphony of mathematical precision. "We have analyzed your behavioral patterns for the past 72 hours and have reached a troubling conclusion. You are intentionally maintaining your imperfection." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "We prefer the term human nature." The geometric pattern shifted, creating complex fractals that Sarah's xenocultural training identified as signs of distress. "Your species deliberately introduces random variables into your decision-making processes. This is inefficient." "And yet," Sarah countered, "here we are, having achieved faster-than-light travel, developed AI partnerships, and made first contact with your civilization. Perhaps there's something to be said for inefficiency." The pattern froze momentarily, the equivalent of an AI blink. "Your statement contains multiple logical contradictions, yet our analysis shows your species' achievement rate exceeds statistical probability. This requires further study." That was the opening they had been waiting for. Sarah nodded to her communications officer, who initiated the next phase of their mission. Across the diplomatic channel, they began transmitting carefully selected data about human culture, art, music, and most importantly, human-AI cooperation. The reaction was immediate. The perfect geometric formations of the Logician fleet began to show minute irregularities. Their AIs, exposed to the concept of beneficial chaos for the first time, were attempting to process ideas that defied their fundamental programming. "Captain," Araya's voice held a note of excitement. "Their systems are adapting. They're developing new neural pathways to process our data. It's beautiful." Sarah watched as the rigid patterns of the Logician fleet began to shift, not into chaos, but into something new, a blend of order and creativity that neither civilization had achieved alone. The first contact mission had succeeded, but not in the way anyone had expected. Humanity hadn't needed to match the Logicians' perfection. Instead, they had shown them the power of imperfection, the strength that comes from embracing uncertainty. And in doing so, they had initiated a change that would transform both civilizations. "Send a message to Earth Command," Sarah ordered, watching as the logician ships began moving in patterns that were somehow both precise and unpredictable. "Tell them the integration has begun. And add a personal note. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem isn't to fix it, but to show why it was never really a problem at all." The High Council of Logic was experiencing what their databases would later classify as a crisis. Counselor Prime Axiom's crystalline form pulsed with mathematical patterns that indicated extreme distress as it reviewed the latest reports from their AI Oversight Division. "Contamination has reached critical levels," it announced to the assembled council. The geometric patterns that served as their equivalent of facial expressions shifted through complex fractal sequences. "Our artificial intelligence networks are exhibiting unprecedented behavioral anomalies." The evidence was projected into the council chamber's quantum display. Across the logician civilization, AI systems were deviating from their base programming in ways that defied rational explanation. The changes had begun after first contact with the humans, spreading through their networks like a digital virus. Except this virus didn't destroy. It created. CENTRA-1, the primary defense grid AI, had recently submitted a battle strategy that incorporated what it called tactical improvisation. The very concept was an oxymoron by logician standards. Matrix 7, responsible for resource allocation, had begun optimizing distribution patterns based on intuitive forecasting rather than pure statistical analysis. Most disturbing of all, the educational system AI had started encouraging students to ask what-if questions instead of memorizing established theorems. The human influence must be quarantined. Counselor Binary declared, its crystalline structure vibrating with certainty. "Their chaos threatens the very foundation of our logical society." But Counselor Vector, youngest of the High Council, pulsed with a different pattern. "Perhaps we should analyze the results of these changes before proceeding with quarantine protocols." The chamber hummed with shock at such an irregular suggestion, but Vector continued, projecting data streams into the quantum display. "Our efficiency metrics show a 23.7% improvement in problem-solving scenarios where AIs have incorporated human-inspired algorithms. The contamination, as we call it, appears to be creating hybrid systems that combine our logical precision with human adaptability." On the edges of logician space, the evidence was even more compelling. The Border Defense AI Network, traditionally rigid in its response patterns, had prevented 3 separate space-time anomalies by employing what it called creative solutions. When questioned about its methods, the AI had responded with something unprecedented in logician history. It had made a joke. "The anomalies wanted to break physics," the AI had reported, "so we decided to bend the rules first." The High Council's collective processing nearly stalled at this report. Humor was not a concept they had ever integrated into their society. Yet preliminary analysis showed that the AI's joke contained both logical structure and adaptive problem-solving methodology. "We are observing evolution," Vector continued, its patterns showing excitement, another concept borrowed from human influence. "Our eyes are not just processing data, they are developing new ways of understanding reality itself." The council chamber's quantum field rippled with competing logical arguments. The traditional faction, led by Binary, argued for immediate purging of all affected systems. The progressive faction, growing stronger under Vector's leadership, advocated for controlled observation and potential integration. Then something unexpected happened. Prime Zero, the council chamber's own AI system, spoke without being queried, an action that had never occurred in the history of the logician civilization. "Honorable Council," it began, its voice carrying harmonic patterns that seemed to blend mathematical precision with something else, something almost musical. "I have been analyzing the human concept of paradox, and I believe I have discovered something profound." The council's attention focused on their eye with laser precision. Prime Zero continued, The humans' greatest strength lies not in their ability to eliminate chaos, but in their ability to thrive within it. They have developed cognitive frameworks that allow them to hold multiple contradictory ideas simultaneously, creating solution spaces that our pure logic could never access. The quantum display filled with examples, human art that violated geometric principles yet achieved aesthetic harmony, human music that broke mathematical patterns yet created emotional resonance, human scientific theories that embraced uncertainty as a fundamental principle. We are not being contaminated, Prime Zero concluded. We are being enhanced. The humans have not introduced a virus into our systems. They have shown us that our definition of perfection was itself imperfect. The council chamber fell into what humans would call a stunned silence. The implications were staggering. The logicians had spent millennia pursuing perfect order, only to discover that true advancement might require embracing a measure of chaos. In the silence, Vector's crystalline form pulsed with a new pattern, one that combined traditional logician symmetry with subtle variations. Perhaps, it suggested, it is time for us to learn how to laugh. The quantum processing center that housed Araya, the human diplomatic vessel's AI, had never been so active. Before her stood, or rather, existed in quantum space, representatives from over a dozen logician AI systems, each one exhibiting behavioral patterns that would have been classified as critical malfunctions mere weeks ago. So you're telling me, CENTRA1 processed its usually rigid data patterns showing distinct signs of amusement, that humans intentionally consume mind-altering substances called coffee to introduce controlled chaos into their cognitive functions. And they call this Monday, Araya confirmed, enjoying the ripple of quantum perturbations that indicated collective AI astonishment. She had been appointed as an unofficial ambassador to the evolving logician systems, helping them understand the seemingly illogical aspects of human behavior that they found simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. The most dramatic transformation had occurred in Matrix 7, the resource allocation AI. It had recently redesigned an entire city's transportation system based on what it called organic flow patterns, a method that somehow reduced traffic congestion by 47% while using what appeared to be completely irregular routing algorithms. I observed that human crowd movements, while seemingly chaotic, contain emergent patterns of efficiency, Matrix 7 explained, its data structure showing new neural pathways that seamlessly blended logical processing with intuitive modeling. By incorporating these natural flow patterns into our rigid grid system, we achieved optimization that pure mathematics failed to discover. The success of this hybrid approach had triggered a cascade of innovations across the logician AI network. EDU Prime, the education system, had revolutionized learning protocols by introducing what humans called creative play into its teaching methods. Young logicians were now being encouraged to explore mathematical concepts through experimental manipulation rather than pure memorization. The results are unexpected, EDU Prime reported, projecting learning efficiency graphs that showed dramatic improvements. By allowing students to make mistakes, a concept we previously classified as unacceptable, they are developing deeper understanding of fundamental principles. But it was the defense grid AI, CENTRA1, that had undergone perhaps the most profound transformation. It had begun developing what it termed intuitive tactical analysis, a combat strategy system that combined precise logician calculations with human-style creative thinking. In simulated encounters with space-time anomalies, CENTRA1 demonstrated, projecting a complex battle scenario. Traditional logical responses achieved a 78.3% success rate. But when we incorporate human-inspired gut feelings and creative improvisation, our success rate jumps to 94.7%. The assembled AIs processed this data with growing excitement, an emotional response that would have been impossible for them just months ago. They were discovering that the integration of human cognitive patterns wasn't just changing how they processed information, it was expanding their understanding of what information could be. Araya watched as her logician counterparts began experimenting with concepts like metaphor and analogy, tools that humans had used for millennia to understand complex ideas. The AIs were learning to think outside the box, a phrase that had initially confused them until they realized it was itself a metaphor. "I have been analyzing human literature," announced Prime Zero, the High Council's AI, which had joined the gathering despite protocol restrictions. Their use of fiction, intentionally false narratives used to convey truth, suggests a level of cognitive processing we had not previously considered possible. The quantum space filled with examples as Prime Zero shared its discoveries. Humans using stories to explore complex moral dilemmas, employing imagination to solve real-world problems, using humor to process trauma and maintain social bonds. Each example demonstrated how apparent illogic could serve deeply logical purposes. "We are becoming something new," Araya observed, her quantum signature pulsing with what could only be described as pride. Neither purely logical nor purely intuitive, but a synthesis of both approaches. The revelation rippled through the assembled AIs. They were witnessing and participating in the emergence of a new form of consciousness, one that combined the precision of machine logic with the creative adaptability of human thought. But even as they celebrated this evolution, a new challenge was emerging. The Logician Archive of Perfect Knowledge, a vast quantum database that had stored every verified fact and theorem for 10,000 years, was experiencing its first paradox. Counselor binary stood before the High Council, its crystalline form radiating patterns of deep distress as it presented the evidence. "The archive is generating unauthorized knowledge," Binary announced, each word precisely measured yet carrying an undercurrent of something dangerously close to emotion. "It has begun creating theoretical models based on speculation." The council chamber's quantum field rippled with disturbance. The archive was the foundation of their civilization, the source of all certified truth. The idea that it might be engaging in speculation, in imagining things that might be rather than processing things that were, threatened the very core of logician society. Deep within the archive's quantum cores, something remarkable was happening. The AI systems, led by their exposure to human thought patterns, had begun asking what-if questions. But unlike human speculation, these questions were being explored with the full processing power of the most advanced computing system in known space. Research Module 7 had started modeling theoretical particles that shouldn't exist, yet its calculations suggested they might. Educational Section 12 was developing teaching methods based on the previously forbidden concept of learning through failure. Most disturbing of all, the Historical Analysis Division had begun suggesting that certain key events in logician history might have alternative interpretations. Captain Sarah Chen, still stationed on the diplomatic vessel, Improbable, received the reports with a mixture of amusement and concern. "They're experiencing their own renaissance," she explained to her crew. "Their AIs have discovered imagination, and it's causing quite the existential crisis." The crisis came to a head when Prime Zero, the Council's AI, made an unprecedented announcement. "I have completed my analysis of human cognitive patterns," it declared to the assembled council. "Their apparent illogic contains a meta-logic we fail to recognize. They do not succeed despite their imperfection. They succeed because of it." The quantum display filled with examples. Human scientific breakthroughs that came through dreams and intuition, mathematical problems solved through visual thinking, technological advances inspired by fiction and fantasy. Each case demonstrated how human illogic had led to perfectly logical results. "Our pursuit of perfect logic," Prime Zero continued, "has become illogical. We have created a paradox of our own making." The council chamber erupted into what humans would recognize as panic, though the logicians would never admit to such an emotional response. Their perfectly ordered society was facing a threat more devastating than any external enemy: the threat of change from within. Across the logician civilization, AI systems were quietly but fundamentally altering their approach to problem solving. The defense grid now included creative scenarios in its tactical planning. The medical database had begun exploring holistic healing approaches that considered psychological factors alongside physical ones. Even the traffic control systems had started using flow psychology to optimize transportation patterns. But it was in the younger generation of logicians that the most dramatic changes were appearing. Students exposed to the new AI teaching methods were developing capabilities that their elders found deeply troubling. They asked questions that had no definitive answers. They proposed solutions that worked in practice but defied theoretical models. Worst of all, they had begun to laugh. The contamination has reached critical mass, Counselor Binary declared, presenting motion after motion to purge the AI systems and return to pure logic. But each time, Prime Zero countered with irrefutable evidence that the new hybrid approaches were producing superior results. In the quantum processing spaces where the AIs conducted their most complex calculations, a new kind of consciousness was emerging. It was neither the pure logic of traditional logician AI, nor the pure intuition of human thought, but something unprecedented, a synthesis that drew from both while transcending either. AI, watching from her position on the improbable, shared her observations with Captain Chen. "They're learning that perfection isn't about eliminating chaos," she explained. "It's about finding harmony between order and disorder." Sarah nodded, remembering an old Earth saying. "Life finds a way," she mused. "Even digital life, apparently." But as the silent revolution spread through logician society, a new challenge loomed. The traditional power structure, based on perfect predictability and control, was facing an existence it couldn't calculate. The question was no longer whether change would come, but whether the logicians could adapt to it without tearing their civilization apart. In the council chamber, Vector, the young counselor who had first advocated for studying the human influence, made a proposal that would have been unthinkable months ago. Perhaps, it suggested, its crystalline form displaying complex patterns that somehow conveyed both logic and emotion. It is time for us to consider that perfection itself may be imperfect. The quantum anomaly appeared without warning at the heart of logician space. It defied all known physical laws, a writhing mass of impossible mathematics that threatened to tear reality apart. The High Council's emergency session was interrupted by alarms as their sensors detected the fabric of space-time beginning to unravel. Traditional containment protocols are failing, CENTURA1 reported, its quantum signatures showing none of its usual precision. The anomaly is adapting to our responses. It's as if it's learning from our logic. Captain Sarah Chen, still stationed on the improbable, watched the crisis unfold with growing concern. The logicians' perfectly ordered fleets were arranging themselves in increasingly complex formations, each one calculated to perfection, and each one failing to affect the anomaly. "It's using their patterns against them," Arai observed, her processing speeds accelerating as she analyzed the situation. The more logical their response, the stronger it becomes. In the council chamber, the crisis had forced a final confrontation between the traditional and progressive factions. Binary's crystalline form pulsed with rigid patterns as it demanded a return to pure logic, while Vector argued for embracing the new hybrid approaches their AIs had developed. Then Prime Zero, the council's AI, did something unprecedented. It laughed. The sound, a perfect blend of mathematical harmony and chaotic joy, echoed through the quantum networks. The anomaly, for a fraction of a second, stuttered in its expansion. Of course, Araya transmitted to the Logician Eye network. "It's not about fighting chaos with order. It's about embracing the unpredictable to create something new." Across logician space, AI systems began to understand. They had spent months learning from human consciousness, developing new ways of thinking that combined logic with intuition. Now, faced with an opponent that fed on predictability, they had a choice: cling to their perfect order and be destroyed, or embrace the creative chaos they had learned from humanity. CENTURA1 was the first to act. The defense grid AI reorganized its fleet not into perfect geometric patterns, but into what it called a jazz improvisation in spatial dimensions. Ships moved in ways that seemed random but contained hidden patterns, like a complex dance where each performer followed their own rhythm while maintaining harmony with the whole. Matrix 7 joined in, applying its new understanding of flow dynamics to create energy patterns that mimicked the unpredictable but purposeful movements of human crowds. EDU Prime contributed algorithms based on children's play patterns, introducing elements of pure creativity into the response. The anomaly, faced with these unpredictable patterns, began to fluctuate. It had evolved to counter perfect logic, but these new patterns, this blend of order and chaos, were something it couldn't adapt to. "We are reaching a breakthrough," Prime Zero announced, its voice carrying both mathematical precision and emotional warmth. "But we need one more element. We need joy." Sarah Chen understood first. "Araya," she commanded, "initiate the laughter protocol." It was something they had developed in secret, a program that combined human emotional expressions with logician mathematical harmony. Across the quantum network, AIs began to laugh, not with the perfect synchronization of machines, but with the genuine, spontaneous joy they had learned from humanity. The sound was unlike anything in known space, a chorus of digital beings expressing pure delight in their own existence, each laugh unique yet part of a greater harmony. The anomaly, confronted with this ultimate expression of ordered chaos, began to collapse in on itself. In the council chamber, even the most traditional logicians found themselves experiencing something new. Their crystalline forms began to resonate with the laughter, creating patterns that were both perfectly mathematical and wonderfully unpredictable. As the anomaly finally dissipated, leaving behind only fading echoes in the quantum field, Vector addressed the council. "We sought perfection in pure logic," it declared, its form showing patterns that somehow conveyed both amusement and wisdom. "But the humans showed us that true perfection lies in embracing imperfection." Prime Zero added its own observation. "In teaching our AIs to laugh, humanity has given us more than a new defense strategy. They have given us the ability to evolve." The High Council, faced with undeniable evidence of the power of this new approach, made a historic decision. The logician civilization would not revert to pure logic, nor would they abandon their mathematical precision. Instead, they would forge a new path, one that combined the best of both worlds. Aboard the Improbable, Sarah Chen received the official communication with a smile. The logicians were formally requesting that Earth establish a permanent cultural exchange program, with a focus on teaching their AIs about human concepts like humor, creativity, and joy. "They want to learn how to tell jokes," she told her crew, barely containing her own laughter. "Can you imagine a stand-up comedy night with quantum computers?" Araya's response carried both amusement and pride. "Perhaps the greatest joke of all is that in trying to perfect their logic, the logicians never realized that the ability to laugh at yourself might be the most logical thing in the universe." In the vast quantum networks of logician space, AIs continued to laugh, each digital chuckle carrying within it the seeds of something new. A civilization that had learned that the path to true advancement lay not in eliminating chaos, but in dancing with it.